Welcome to Beyond the Margins, the podcast, the place where we engage, educate, empower, and elevate. I'm your lead learner and host, Dr. Sohn A. Butts. Each week, I sit down with some of the brightest minds and dynamic leaders in education to challenge traditional narratives, especially those shaping the experiences of students at the margins. Together, we explore new ways to reimagine schools, classrooms, and learning communities as spaces for growth and transformation. At Beyond the Margins, we center students too often overlooked, sharing the stories, strategies, and ideas that matter most. Voices long pushed aside are brought to the center. Welcome to Beyond the Margins. Did you know that school leadership is second only to classroom instruction and its impact on learning outcomes? Research from the Wallace Foundation shows that effective school leadership influences teacher retention, school culture, and long-term student success, especially in historically marginalized communities. Today's episode is deeply personal. I'm honored to welcome not just a highly respected educator, administrator, and scholar, but my first teacher, my mother. Dr. Marionette Butts is the original Dr. Butts, the OG educator in my life and the blueprint behind much of the work I do today. With over 3 decades of service as a classroom teacher, guidance counselor, building level administrator, and professor training future school leaders, Dr. Butts represents a generation of educators who didn't just manage schools. They built institutions, shaped culture, and anchored communities. This conversation is about leadership, vision, and what happens when education is treated not as a job, but as a calling passed down through generations. Help me welcome my mother, mentor, and model teacher, Dr. Marionette Butts, to Beyond the Margins. Let me say welcome to you, Mom of Dr. Marionette Butts. Welcome to Beyond the Margins.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah. I often say, and I even wrote it in the book, my work is largely an extension of your work as an educator. So to get started today, can you please tell the Beyond the Margins audience about your journey through the profession?
Well, I became a kind of incidental educator. As an undergraduate, I thought I was going to be a research scientist and work at NIH. That was my goal. Life has a way of directing you to the path that you're really supposed to be on. And I got married, so I wasn't moving to Washington. And I got into a program at Temple for urban educators. They were looking for young graduates from the South to come up and, trying to fill their schools. And I kind of got bitten by that bug then. And from then on, I just pursued education from teacher to guidance counselor to building level administrator.
Your first job in a school, I believe, you were a bookkeeper, a part-time bookkeeper?
I started as a substitute teacher.
Okay.
And then, I met people and they, saw something in me, and a job opened as a bookkeeper at a newly formed middle school. And I got that job. And from that job, I met people and people could see what I could do. So my principal took it upon himself to say, wait a minute, you should be teaching. You should be sitting here. And so he kind of kept referring me, even though I did not have teacher credentials at the time. But they were willing to give me provisional until I could meet that goal. And then once I was in the classroom, I saw I had a natural affinity for instruction.
So you were in the classroom for 13 years?
I was in the classroom for 13 years, yes. And
And
then 7 years as a guidance counselor and 12 years as an administrator.
so that's a robust career. And then you went on to train teachers as a professor as well.
Once I got my doctorate, I worked as an adjunct professor at Norfolk State University in the program training at school administrators. And while I was in the public school setting, I did many workshops for professional development for teachers too.
Now, do you think the fact that my grandmother, your mother, was an educator played into your ultimate career choice in the profession?
I do. I really do. I was sharing with my granddaughter just today because my doctorate hangs behind me. And I told her when my mother passed away, when I was about 14, she had a master's degree from NYU. And I'd always been around her friends and associates who were all teachers, because at that time, in the 50s and the 60s, you were either a teacher, a nurse, or perhaps a social worker if you were Black and had finished a 4-year university. And my mother had a master's degree, and I didn't quite understand what a master's degree was,
Hmm.
but I did say to myself, especially after her passing, I hung it on my wall and said, I'm going to do that. I'm going to do that. Not even really thoroughly understanding what that was.
Yeah.
But I found out that my mother had taken the initiative to try to get her master's, even though there was not a program in all of North Carolina that would
Wow.
allow her as a Black teacher to get a master's degree. There was no graduate program.
Yeah.
So she spent her summers going to several summers. I don't even know how many, but going to New York to work on her master's at NYU.
Wow. And it's funny because that's what you saw. And then fast forward, that's what I saw. The litany of teachers that came and your colleagues that became my aunts and your good friends. And I was just surrounded by educators. So I was wondering if that's just part of our DNA or our exposure.
I think probably a little bit of both. It does take a community of people, I think, to push forward a narrative or a passion. Usually, people find themselves, they find their tribe, and yeah, I think that's what happens.
Okay, well, let's get into it. So, how would you personally define educational leadership? Beyond titles or positions, what is educational leadership?
Leadership can be on several levels, so it shifts. But if you're talking about the building level, and I
Hmm.
think that's where your work is directed to, that person has to be both visionary, inspirational, measurer, truth bearer, gatherer. That person's a lot of things, a lot of
Hmm.
roles. But I think the main role probably is identifying the direction that you'd like the school to take,
Yeah.
the culture and the climate of the school, and being able to cast that vision to those that you supervise.
Yeah. And so that vision casting, that overarching umbrella of protecting and directing the organization, that is a hallmark of leadership. But sometimes we see something different. Sometimes we see management. So what's the difference between management and leadership in these educational spaces?
Well, management are the tasks that have to be done. The scheduling, the rules, the day-to-day running of the school. And most people can grasp management just fine. Over
Yeah.
time, you kind of learn the systems, but the one of vision has a little more nuance to it.
Yeah.
And you talk about vision, you've got to have measured what the need is, come up with a plan for meeting that need, be almost the Pied Piper for leading those under you to meet that need, and be able to prove by some metric that you did meet that need,
Mm.
and along with that, you would have celebration and a reputation. I think many people don't realize that every school has a reputation. And I remember this even when I was in the classroom, that early on I heard someone say, you have a reputation, you have things being spoken about you. You won't be the one to do it, but the people you interact with will do that. And schools are like that. So it is important that the leadership take that into consideration. It's not just running the show, 8:30 to 3:30. There are a lot of tasks and some of them can get delegated.
Yeah.
But leadership has to lead the way for a school to be a good school, a productive school, a welcome addition to the community. I think number one, you have to be a visionary in that you have to see what the need is.
Mm.
You have to be a trustworthy leader too, because those people that you lead will not move forward if they don't trust you.
Mhm.
And then you have to be able to coach them toward the goals that you set up and be a collaborator too, because you can't do it all yourself as the leader. You have to bring in those persons who are actually doing the day to day. I think you and I have laughed about how faculty view the new principal
Right.
is to say, I was here when you got here and I'm gonna
Exactly.
be here when you
I'll wait you
gone
out.
too.
Yeah.
Right, right. So how do you somehow harness that faculty to your vision or the vision that you come up with together? It shouldn't be just your vision; it's
Yeah.
a vision that you shared. But you know, the sad thing that I see a lot of times today, especially in urban schools, is that doesn't seem to be what gets done. The vision it's just the day to day. Let's get
Yeah.
through from 8 to 3, and so then the school is just out there floating, and not having a goal, not meeting a goal.
And that's kind of where I wanted to go next. What happens or what becomes of a school when the vision is left to die on the vine? And there's always culture. It's just, are you controlling the culture or is the culture controlling you? So what happens when there's this disconnect from true vision and leadership?
Well, I sad to say, all we would have to do is, go 2 or 3 blocks in either direction to see a failed school. By that, I mean people just show up and press their way through the day. And it's not just the faculty, everybody concerned does that thing, whether it be the people who do maintenance or people work in cafeteria or every student that walks in that door.
Yeah.
And if the school is just left with, well, why did we come today? What was it for?
Yeah.
Where are we going? Are we better today than we were yesterday? Are we better this year than we were last year? What were the needs? So then the community dies too. They have no respect or hope that school is doing anything to promote or push forth something of value.
Not only do teachers have reputations, but schools have reputations too.
Yes, they do.
Yeah, and they speak well before students enter the building.
Yeah, very, very true. In the city that I live in, which is, I call it suburban, but I did see some statistics that calls it an urban school division. I think we have about 6 high schools and 8 or 9 junior high school or middle schools, and then numerous elementary schools.
Elementary.
And it doesn't, you don't have to listen long before if you're talking about schools and you start listing a particular school or this school versus this school, people already have formed an opinion about, is that a progressively good school or is
Mhm.
that, oh, I don't want my kid to go to that school, that's ugh,
Yeah.
so you do have a reputation. It's like the bully on the block. We know those kids, ain't Hester's boys, how they do, so they start looking at schools like that.
Yeah.
And it's very shameful for 2 reasons. Number one, the students who come through that school year after year after year, they're suffering loss. And it's not loss that's recoverable. You can't go back and do grades 1, 2, 3, 4 all over again, and you're a poor fifth grade student. You
Yeah.
just can't do that. So you've lost all that time. And then I'm always troubled by the financial output that cities and tax base puts into these schools for them not to be performing. You know, it's a very unique thing we have in this country to have public schools,
Mhm.
schools where everybody can go to, and they don't have to pay to go to them. We've said as a community of people, we're going to pay to educate everyone. So we put out all these millions of dollars every year. We build these great and mighty facilities. I
Yeah.
mean, they're to be rivaled, technology wise and environment wise, and just a pleasant place to be. Isn't it a shame that we haven't said, well, we want the product coming out of this great Taj
Mm.
Mahal of a building, We
Be
want to have
equal to the architecture.
and so when you get down to the nuts and bolts of running a school, it is very challenging to get into a school, see the need, create the vision, support the vision, celebrate the vision, and measurably say, we're much better this year than we did that this year. And thus change our reputation and
Yeah,
change our outcomes. That's the work of it all. We don't lack for funds. Now, I've heard your story about working in big city schools, and you talked about, there's even no toilet paper in the bathroom, or nobody's cleaning the hall. We'll have that problem here,
yeah, yeah.
so we should have every school being very well,
Right.
but if you talk about a big urban school system like you have worked in, and that's the case, then we've already lost that.
Yeah,
We've lost that. We'd have to come back, start at square one,
yeah,
and nobody takes the time to do that. And I don't want to preach doom and gloom, because I mean, as an educator, I always feel there's room and time and talent for correction, but
yeah.
you have to have the will to do it.
To do it. And that
Yeah.
brings me to my next question, right? What advice would you give to a new leader or new educator if they are entering a place where maybe the vision hasn't been solidified or the culture has been on a decline? What advice would you give that educator or that leader into changing the inherited conditions of a school?
Well, I think from the moment you get the assignment, you need to start doing your homework about where am I going? What is this place? What is
Hmm.
it? I think in your book you mentioned something about the environment. I think one of your last chapters speaks to now we need the environment is essential.
Yeah, yeah, we
You have
talked about the
yeah,
environment in 3 phases, right?
right,
We have
right,
the location, which is the historical geographic, facilitation of the region. There's the actual place, which is the school itself and its history, what we're talking about, and then there's
right.
the actual space where the learning takes place, the classroom
The
itself.
classroom, right. All of those things would go into what your vision direction would be. And you would need to know who are the stakeholders. If you got appointed to your new job in June, you need to spend that summer saying, I need to meet with all the department heads from last year. I need to get to hear from them. And then I need to just hear from some faculty. We have a general meeting. Tell me what went wrong
Yeah,
in your view. How can
yeah,
we improve? What would you like to see change?
yeah. What
Before
do I need to
before
know? Yeah.
Right, tell me what I need to know,
Mhm.
and do some very good active listening. I noticed that about leaders, sometimes they don't listen.
Yeah,
So you just need to be quiet and listen, take a few notes or whatever, make sure that they understand, because they've seen people come and go. Many of those teachers have been in that building for 15 years, 18 years, 20 years, and here you come. You're just the new guy.
mhm,
And so they need to know that you're doing that before you sit down and say, well, maybe we can work on this, and know that you can't do it all in one school term.
yeah. Takes
And
time.
so let's decide what we're going to do this year. These two things that we're going to do
Mm,
this year right here. And let's work on those two things. And then next year we'll revisit where we are at the end of the year and say what two things for next year.
yeah.
And people can believe in that. But if you're coming and you got a whole list of 10 things, we're gonna do this, and this, people just think you're trying to build your resume. They're not interested. They don't think that you have a genuine interest in them.
The work. Yeah, in the work.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. What does it look like when a leader aligns the people, the purpose, the resources into a kind of synergy? What happens when that happens?
Magic.
Magic, magic. Right.
Magic happens. It's really quite amazing. Everybody wants to feel they have value in this endeavor, even down to the student. They want to feel they have value.
Yeah.
Students pride about their school. We're the taggers and we won last year's state. They have a stake in that school. I go to this high school.
Hmm.
I go to that
Yeah.
high school. I will end up going there. If I'm in middle school, I'm going to that school. High school usually takes the top of the icing on the cake.
Yeah.
Uh, but all of those things that help build the cake are underneath. And so we call them feeder schools.
Mm,
So they really are my high school, even when they're in fourth grade, because
yeah.
they're my feeder school. So when all of those things take place, we get a chance to change the reputation of our school community. And then we start hearing things about, yes, you want your child to go to XYZ elementary school. Why? Because they can see the progression. XYZ elementary, XYZ middle,
Middle,
and
XYZ.
going and exactly. And we have something special here. And you know, your hometown is divided into boroughs. You know, we have certain segments, big chunks of the city that are boroughs. And you certain people move to certain areas
For the
because
school.
of that
Yeah.
borough. Yes. And the schools but every school, every school in this whole entirety should have an excellent reputation and leaders that have credibility and get out. I say to that leader, you ask what would that new leader do? Get out. You can go to that church. You can drop
Mm,
by.
yeah.
You can go to a community
Yeah.
action kind of thing and just introduce, and then they feel like you have a stake. I think one of the things in this city, when our big principals, especially those high school principals, if they lived in their community,
Oh
I
man.
think many people thought they could walk on water.
Yeah.
I know who you know who I'm talking
I
about.
know
Your
who you're
high
talking about.
school principal.
You like the
Yeah,
mayor. You are
yes,
the
he was
man.
the mayor.
In
Yes.
fact, you might have more power because you're around in the public eye for much longer than a mayor.
That's right. That's right. They know that you live right down there on such and such street and
Mhm.
that your children went here
Yes.
and that kind of thing. And then if you take interest in, maybe there's a loss, maybe there's a tragedy and you show up, someone dies kind of tragically, you show up,
Yes.
or if a family is in need of something and you can support them in the right resource, if you can make a phone call and use your power.
Yeah.
If
Yep.
you could make a phone call and, "Oh, okay, I'm calling the city because." Yeah,
That
that's
speaks to every school being a part and being in a community. It's not separate from the community. It's a integral part of the community.
of the community.
Of the community, right?
Right.
We don't do a well enough job of bringing the community in and telling the community what's happening on the inside. But we
It's true.
institutionalize it in a silo when really it should be integrated into every day.
Into every day, and proof of that is when in limited amounts, when things occur at the school, you can see that turnout of parents coming to see their kids in the concert or in the play
Mhm.
or some sort of sports activity. So they have an interest in the school. They just have to believe that you want them to participate.
Right. I've seen it a lot of times. I saw it back home in my hometown, and I've seen it working in large urban districts. We have a way of turning parents off to
Yes.
wanting to come to the school. It's like the small things we do. These same parents, they have historical memory of these schools. Yeah,
Yes,
they went to the school
some of
too.
them went to that. That's exactly right.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And so we can't separate the two. This is when we talk about vision and we're talking about leadership, it has to extend out of the doors of the school as
It
well.
does. It does. What people sometimes fail to realize is when this giant building sits in this community, the staff and the community have to believe in it and have to care about it. There are days that, people can storm into the building and act very rude or whatnot, but you still have to just say, well, I'm going to handle that. I'm going to look into that. They have to know that you're going to be genuine about
Mhm.
that. You can't fool people. You
Nope.
might think you're fooling people, but you're not fooling people if you're not genuine. And
Yeah.
if you don't treat them with respect, then you can't expect respect. And that's the thing you have to pass along to your staff. We don't act disrespectful in any way or dismissive in any way to our parents and their concerns.
Beyond the Margins, the podcast, will return in a moment.
Your Divine Journey, LLC, is here to walk with you through life's ups and downs. Whether you're seeking therapy, life coaching, support, or personal consultations, we provide a safe, empowering space to heal, grow, and step into your best self. Your journey is unique. Let's make it divine. Connect with us today and start moving forward with clarity, confidence, and peace. www.yourdivinejourneyllc.com.
At the Travel Bureau, we are dedicated to creating bespoke luxury experiences for the discerning traveler, specializing in detail-rich journeys designed with heart and intention. We turn your dream getaway into a beautiful, curated reality. Wherever you're going, the Travel Bureau will get you there in style, comfort, and joy.
If you're teaching urban, alternative, or non-traditional students and wondering why engagement feels harder than ever, the new book by Dr. Sohn A. Butts is for you. Unlocking student engagement isn't theory. It's real strategies for real classrooms, built on trust, relevance, and relationships. And educators across the country are already responding. Unlocking Student Engagement debuted at #1 in cultural pedagogies, philosophy and social aspects of education, educational professional development, and educational certification and development. Grab your copy today wherever you buy books, and let's change how engagement shows up in our classrooms. Welcome back to Beyond the Margins.
One of the hallmarks of a great educator is their ability to reflect on their practice and reflect on their growth. So, what is the role of reflection in professional growth for educators?
When you're wearing your hat of leadership, you need to be willing to say that didn't work, and why didn't that work? Why did that go awry? And as well as pat yourself on the back or smile a lot if you get the award for doing the best. Or, you know, your school did great. And then always include your stakeholders in your reflection. You know, tell me how you think I did.
Yeah.
And when they give you feedback, even if that feedback is not so positive, accept it, you know, and say, how would you like to see us going forward? You know, I think we made a big error, you know, or I made a big decision that maybe wasn't thought through very well. How can we fix that next time? We don't want to keep doing that. I
Yeah,
think people can appreciate that,
yeah, yeah.
that you admitted that we got a little off our path and come back. If you see you do it, then they will say,
They
well,
know
I
they're
can do
allowed.
it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah,
if I did something that wasn't so great, you're willing to hear me out too. Yeah.
yeah. The
Mhm.
whole grace effect, right?
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
As I was kind of looking through some things today, it was so many little, I won't call them tricks, but things that principals could do that I never did. And the day of a school, it's probably a public school administrator, it can get away from you
Quickly.
quickly. Your day becomes not your day. Your
Yeah.
day becomes run by whatever the next emergency is or the next thing walking in the door.
Mhm.
But to be out and about more, you know, oftentimes if I was out because the bell rang or something like that, but it wasn't to necessarily interact, you know. And one of the little tricks they were saying, well, you know, get a roll, you know how nurses have this rolling cart thing that their
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
computers on, and then roll that out on the hallway doing class changes or whatnot, and just be out there, you know,
Mhm.
and you have your little cart in case someone says something to you that you need to kind of get back to. Because one of my professors, when I was training to be a principal, he said he always carried a little thing in his pocket. He said because he realized when people saw him, they always had something to tell him, you know,
Mhm.
to say. And he said, I can't remember all of that, you
Very
know.
true.
He said, and
Yeah.
he said the best words that an administrator could use is, let me get back to you.
Let me get back to you.
Give yourself some space
Yeah.
to hear it, to think about it, to see what a possible solution was. And I had another supervisor when I was a guidance counselor. If you come up to him with a great idea that you thought was a great idea, why don't we do that, 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 that? And he said, you know, that sounds really interesting. Could you put that in writing for me? Could you kind of spell out what you think. So then that gives you something very tangible to see that. But you've given that person an open door to talk to you. So reflections can come not only just from yourself, but what the opinion of the people who saw you carry out the work. Yeah.
If you could redesign educational leadership, what's one thing you would change first? The way we go about the practice of, training or developing educational leaders, what's one thing that you would change or augment?
I would think I would try to create a training program for leaders. I know when I was approved to the board to serve as a building level administrator, I hadn't had any practice. It
Yeah.
wasn't like there was an academy that I could go to, a professional level academy. I'm already in the school division. You know what I would do? Teachers would get student teachers. They get a chance to practice being a teacher under the supervision
Of a
of
teacher.
a teacher. And so administrators rarely do that. I think the training ground for principal is to be an assistant principal, but an assistant principal is a acting administrator,
Yeah, that's another role.
Yes, you have jobs to do,
Yeah, yeah.
you know? So, I think if we could work up and now how that would work, I would have to really give it a lot of thought, but I think that would be if you had a pool of, people who are interested in moving to the leadership role, find a way to let them see someone in practice from the leadership side. Now, they've seen their building level principal be in practice, but they're seeing it from the eye
Yeah.
of the
The
faculty.
assistant. You're right, right.
Right. So if they could follow or shadow building level administrators, even if it's for half a day,
Mhm.
a couple of times a month, because you're in this leadership academy. From this pool of people, we're going to pick our next building level people. And I know it's a matter of probably money or outlay, because if I'm over there half a day, twice a month, doing my leadership academy, who's covering my class?
Yes, right.
But I think those problems can be
They're
solved.
solvable. There are solutions to them. Yeah.
They're solvable problems.
That's a scheduling concern more than anything else.
Right. I
Yeah.
think would do more to prepare people rather than just having them walk in the door and expecting them to perform. Because very often, and I felt like this as a new administration, well, my job is to make sure this place,
Yeah,
stays tight
oh,
till 3:30,
yeah, yeah,
And so you don't get a chance to do all those things and to give professional development as to how you evaluate teachers,
yeah,
because that's going to be one of your jobs, and to give some sort of method and metrics for doing a good job. Yeah, we have these different forms, but you even know what that means.
yeah.
You want to make sure of that. That would go a long way in preparing people for the task.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
How do leaders stay visionary in systems that may be resistant?
It's difficult, but you have to, I think, stick to your gut and have proof that this is the vision that needs to be for this building. Where's your proof? And you can use your data, you can use your outcomes, you can even use surveys that have come in from the faculty about what they don't like or what's not working. And I don't mean just the teaching faculty. The school, I always joke and say, I've done everything at the school except fry the French fries and drive the bus. So, the those people also have input as to
Yeah.
vision. So if I go before the school board or the superintendent to talk about the vision I want to have for my school or present that, I have the facts as to why this needs to happen. Why this needs to happen. And so you want to present that problem with evidence and then present a plan, a kind of general plan, because you want this plan to be shaped from a lot of different areas, but a
Mhm.
general plan as to which direction we need to go to take care of it.
You've been around education either as a student, all your life or as a teacher. As an educational elder, what is something in today's educational landscape that hasn't changed much at all that should be on our radar?
Some of it deals with what I just said about training people to come into the building. And another is to give teachers an opportunity to just do better. You can spend so much of your time with, say, I would call that person a teacher who needs strengthening. They have value, and you don't want to throw away value, or run them away. So retention, it needs to probably boost it up, because what I hear now is, yes, I'm leaving, enough of this.
Yeah.
So if everyone leaves, then your talent leaves too, which leaves you with the less talented candidate in there. And I see that as a thing of it. And some of my friends who have retired too, we were like, I would not want to do it now. But that's short-sighted of us too, because schools still have to be schools. So I think that might be the thing that has not changed much. How do you support teachers and get them to improve and be strong and believe in what they're doing and know that they're supported? Because that's what I hear from the grapevine, that they don't feel supported. They don't feel any of that. And I've heard it from you, that you didn't have the equipment you needed. You didn't have the resources you needed, and you didn't have the support. And I heard it from my grandson, who just started as a teacher this year too, Alex. And in that, I don't know what to do with these troubled kids. I'm not trained to do that. And we just need to pay attention to that, so that the vision we have laid out can be carried out.
Yeah.
And not hindered by these little minutiae that come up. They're not little to the day. I've seen the time that I spent half of my day dealing with someone who was disrupted.
Yeah.
And that's no way to spend the capital. That's no way to spend it.
Yeah, that piece about training, and I know your research was around professional development. That training piece is important because it's always ongoing. The landscape is always changing. The river we stood in 3 or 5 years ago in education is completely different. We talk about pre-COVID, post-COVID, but even since COVID, we've probably had at least 2 or 3 different iterations of, education evolution, because it's always changing. It not just behavioral practices and restorative practices, but how do we get my nephew Alex not to burn out as an educator early in his career by not giving him what he needs to survive?
Not giving him what it needs and frustrating him, saying, well, I can't do this. I'm going to have to do something else.
Do something else. Yeah.
And that's already happened to his sister.
Yeah.
That she just said, I'm not doing that.
And it happens all the time. But we see that under support, the sheer demand of the profession, the low salary, the disrespect, the lack of support, it really is a perfect storm for pushing people away from the profession.
Exactly. And I can't help but think, well, what on earth is going to happen if all the people who are well-trained, and well-trained is definitely necessary, like for all the technological reasons that you just mentioned. If we lose those talented people, where does that leave us? Where does that leave us? So I would imagine the job of a superintendent is a difficult one these days, because it's more politics than it ever was. They're a political instrument too. And then I think communities are demanding, we pay all these taxes. What are we getting for it? And many people are turning the route to private schools. And I often say to myself, what is it the private schools are doing so great that we couldn't do? What is that thing?
Yeah, and I wonder about that too, Ma. And I wonder if that's more about perception, or is there some real difference in the data? Is it the small group setting? Is it, people who can afford private schools have other resources available?
Right.
Which also begs the question about charters and unique charter models. And is it just an opportunity to rethink how we approach education generally?
I think very much so. The demographic is going to be the place that people want to lay the blame. Where the private school is more one demographic, or just 2 or 3 different demographics. And so they don't have those problems of maybe behavior.
Average childhood experiences and the trauma.
Exactly.
But that's not true though, because
it's not true. But I mean, that's the talk.
Yeah, that's the talk. But a lot of these high income, two-parent households in the suburbs have the same issues or
Same
different
issue.
issues that create stress and trauma for their learners.
Right.
So you're right. It's more about what we say than what is real.
It's the reputation that we have created.
Yeah.
And it always has to be the underdog. And for right now, in many cases, the public school is the underdog, even though it's better resource, it's better staff, because I know many of these private schools are not staffed very well and not staffed with people
That are
who have
licensed
the
and
credentials.
credentialed.
Yes,
Right.
exactly. They
Yeah.
can do what they want, you know?
Yeah.
And whereas we're held to the state standard and the national standard and all those kinds of things. And
Yeah.
people have to, we talked about when you mentioned salary, that we have these people who have spent many years in school to get a teaching degree. And for many of them, they have incurred student debt to do that. And still they have to meet the certification to be a teacher. So we've got this high threshold for that. And bringing them in and letting them down the vine makes no sense to me.
I agree. When future leaders look back at this moment in education, what do you hope they see and say about this period?
What that generation brings to the table after they have gone through the grade system. Are we producing a workforce that will produce stability and further the growth of technology and industry and all of those things? Because whether people want to admit it or not, all of these things came from schools. These kids came from schools,
Yeah.
and if we've done a good job, then we will have a viable workforce and a viable country. And I think it was some of the founding fathers who says if we're going to have a democratic functioning society in this country, then we have to have people who understand what democracy is, that they're educated
Yeah.
to their role and the function. So I think a lot of it is going to say what's the end product, And what is so sad to me sometimes, Dr. Sean, is that young people struggle through high school, barely getting through, having no interest, turn 18 and maybe graduate, turn 18 or 19, and they go out and get these 2 for-penny jobs and realize I cannot support myself
Mhm.
on those jobs. I need more training. And then they go back to train.
Mhm.
And I'm glad they do, that they see that path. But why would you wait? If you take a kid from some African village and gave them all the tools that we have here, oh, they would be running. They would be at the top of the heap. And we have just allowed them to matriculate from ninth grade to 10th grade to out the door, and they haven't gleaned
Anything.
what we had to offer.
Yeah. Yeah.
We had all those things to offer. And I think most countries around the world would just say, oh, I don't know what it'll take to get people to see it. One of the first things people always want to put on there, one of my daughters says this all the time, it's the home. They didn't do anything with them at the home. We've always had kids that had trouble homes, but they were
Yeah.
able
Yeah.
to hang in there. And
Yeah.
and what I remember of my mother and them, they were kids that this sounds kind of bad. They lived on the other side of the track,
Right. Right. Right.
so they didn't have a whole lot of support. But once they got to that school building, those teachers
Everything.
had a hold of them.
Yeah.
And yes, you gonna learn
Yep.
this, and yes, you go.
Yep.
And they saw those kids and pushed them all the way through college.
That reminds me of a story of the daddy used to tell me. There is a professor who's well known in Norfolk, very well known, who grew up in abject poverty, the worst kind. But it was the motivator, that was the engine, that was the drive. And I had this professor in college, and he talked about it. And so that cannot be the excuse. That's the fuel for the sail
That's
to
it.
push and motivate. And so we can't take that cop out, and we often do.
We
Yeah.
often do. And, it's the home. Like you can't do anything about it. If anything, you want to tell that kid, okay, things are bad right now, but hey, because
Yep.
what I used to say to my kids as a guidance counselor, your present situation isn't your permanent situation.
Yep. Things change.
You can do something about this.
I couldn't have said it better myself. I feel like a lot of times I'm just speaking the words that you've already spoken to me. Is there anything you want to say as we close? Anything you want us to take those still in the field, marching out, doing the work from your place on retirement high? Is there anything that we should know or that you want to say to us in parting?
Well, I certainly do enjoy retirement, but there are those moments as I was kind of reading through your book as you did it, I was so lit. I was so energized that I wanted to go back to the classroom. So I still enjoy teaching. Sometimes I think with my grandkids, they think I teach too much,
And your kids, not just
and
your
my
grandkids.
kids.
Well, Mother, you are a consummate educator. I've watched you teach. I've been your student. I've been the recipient of your wisdom and your knowledge. I thank you. I appreciate you and I love you. Obviously, you're the queen mother here. So we'll have you back. We'll talk about other things. Thank you so
Thank
much
you
for your
for
time
having
today,
me,
Mom.
dear.
Anytime. As Dr. Marionette Butts, or Ma, as I call her, reminds us, leadership isn't about keeping the doors open from 8 to 3. It's about casting vision, cultivating trust, and protecting purpose. When schools lose vision, they don't just lose direction. They lose community, credibility, and hope. But when leadership is rooted in service, reflection, and belief in people, magic happens. Culture shifts, reputations change, and futures are unlocked. Here's the truth from beyond the margins. Education doesn't move forward on policy alone. It moves on people, legacy, and love. I wonder, what would happen if every school was led by someone who didn't just manage the building, but carried the community, the history, and the children in their heart?
Next time on Beyond the Margins.
We have to see students as individuals. It's okay to step back. Take time to connect with your students, to get to know them on an individual level, letting them know that, hey, I see what you're going through and it's okay. We're going to get through this.
What are some of the warning signs that culture is sliding in the wrong direction in a school or organization?
When we're looking at discipline data, when we're looking at our student feedback surveys, when we're looking at academic data, there's a correlation in, the setting and what's happening in that environment, if it's thriving or declining. If we're seeing lots of behaviors happening in that setting, more than likely you're going to see that the school is not meeting the expectations.
Thank you for joining us on Beyond the Margins. If you've enjoyed today's conversation, share this episode, rate and review the show, and let's keep the dialogue going. If you would like to connect, email me at Sean@beyondthemarginsllc.com. That's SOHN @beyondthemarginsllc.com. It's been a pleasure being with you. Until next time, keep teaching, keep learning, keep leading, and keep pushing beyond the margins.